Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed your lunch, and hope you guys are ready to learn some coding, learn some more things about Braintree. This session is to explain the tools and resources for Braintree integration. My name is Vinay D'Souza. I'm a director of Global Merchant Services here at PayPal, and I'm here with Micah and Anand, who are over there. We're going to go through some of the tools and resources for Braintree integration. A little bit about the agenda we have. I'm going to talk about the merchant integration lifecycle, the integration patterns we use. Micah is going to go through the sandbox and control panels. And in the end, Anand is going to do a deep dive into the Braintree integration, talk about the GraphQL APIs, Fastlane integration, et cetera. And then we can go to some Q&A. Initially, the merchant integration lifecycle, why we want to present that is, you guys have heard from the CTO of BigCommerce, some other folks, that they've gotten so much help integrating Fastlane. You guys have heard how cool and how easy it is to integrate Fastlane. One of the reasons why it's easier is we, as merchant services, give you guys that help so that you guys can integrate faster. We have solution engineers who help you design the integration right from the inception. They'll help you figure out what payment flows is better. They'll give you artifacts like solution design documents, swim lanes, code samples, code pens, everything that you guys will need to conceptualize your integration, your payment flow. After that, once that's done, we have integration engineers who will actually help the implementation of that actual design that was designed with you guys, and then walk you through the certification process, make sure that you guys are live to site. These are the resources we have in-house. That's one of the reasons why it's easier. You've heard the CTOs mention that it took them about a few weeks, a couple of sprints to actually go live. And that's one of the reasons why we want you guys to integrate this faster. We have the resources. So this is one of the incentives we provide. We have people over here, solution engineers, integration engineers, engagement managers. Even after you go live, we have CSMs and technical account managers to ensure that your go lives are in good condition, your production sites are in good condition. There's no issues following that. A little bit about the integration patterns that we observe generally. We see the most common integration pattern is the client SDK and the server SDK. We've heard SDKs being talked a lot. On the client SDKs, we have 3 flavors: Web SDK, which is JavaScript SDK, and then Android and iOS to support your mobile needs. And on the server side, we have 6 flavors: .NET, Java, Python, Ruby, PHP, and all this so that you guys can, whatever flavor of languages you guys use on your servers, whatever stack you have, you can just pull in these 6 flavors of server-side SDK and start running very quickly. This makes your integration really zoom fast. I've seen merchants go live within a few 2-3 days to even weeks, and you can actually host a site, drop in SDKs, see your client SDK pop up with JavaScript. We take care of all your PCI compliance. You don't have to worry about being PCI compliant. Our client-side SDK actually has hosted fields that ensure that you're completely PCI compliant. You don't have to worry about that. So with the client-side SDK and server-side SDK, your integration is much faster. Most of our SMB, mid-market merchants, even some of the larger merchants, end up using this pattern, which is client SDK, server-side SDK. The second pattern that I want to go over is using the client SDK and GraphQL. This is a pattern which we see a lot of the LEs use. One of the reasons why they use it is they don't want the burden of using PayPal's or Braintree's server-side SDK, or they have a stack that does not support one of the server-side SDK languages. An example is if my server stack uses Go language, and you don't see a Go language supported here. So what they would do is they would actually do the GraphQL calls from their Go language backend. And they would make sure that they use our client SDK, so they still don't have to worry about the PCI compliance part that generally they would have to worry about. So you still get the advantages of being PCI compliant on the client side, which is your JavaScript SDK or Android or iOS. And on the server side, you can still make GraphQL calls, which are quick and easy. The last one, which is a little rare one, we see is the API only, SDK-less integrations. Some of the very large enterprises who have managed to be PCI compliant on the client side, they host their own fields. They're able to capture credit card information. They're liable for their own maintaining the credit card information on their own sites. They're OK with it. They usually use this, where they won't use the client SDK. They will host the client side themselves, but use our GraphQL. They will use Braintree as a processor, and they'll process and they'll do the transactions. So this is a rare integration pattern that we see, but it is there. It's prevalent. We do support those. Going from here, I want to go do a deep dive into how all of this fits together underneath, where we're talking about the Braintree client SDK. Your client is either your JavaScript SDK, your hosted page, which hosts the payment information, or your app, which is on either iOS or Android. And then on the back end, you will have your merchant server, whichever stack you're loading it on. Maybe it's Node.js or Ruby or Python. And then in the end, you have Braintree server, which manages all the payment processing. So once you load up your page, the first thing that'll happen is it'll initiate the client, and your merchant server will send a client token to that page and authenticate it, saying that, hey, this is a valid page or valid client that can host a page. Once that's done, the page will then load up your customer information. It'll give you a hosted field to ask for your credit card information. Now, that's a hosted field hosted by Braintree. So that credit card information gets encrypted and gets sent to the Braintree server, and then Braintree server will respond with a one-time use payment token called a nonce. That nonce is then sent to the client. Now, the client is completely oblivious to what's encrypted inside. They cannot reuse. So the question of reusing, that's where we give you your PCI compliance. That credit card information cannot be reused by anybody else. Nobody can hack into it. It's completely safe. That nonce is then sent over to your merchant server. And then the merchant server, again, is totally encrypted, cannot open the nonce, cannot do anything with it. Merchant server then uses that nonce to confirm a payment information. Once the confirmation is done, it'll send it over to the Braintree server. And the Braintree server will confirm the payment is completed. And that's the complete loop for a payment method token to go back and forth to ensure that a payment is completed from the user to the backend merchant side. With this, I want to take a break here, and I want to call on Micah, who's actually going to walk you guys through the Braintree Sandbox and the control panel, and he's going to talk more in detail about that. Please welcome Micah.
Thank you all. Nice to meet you. My name is Micah Johnson. I'm an integration engineer with PayPal's large enterprise integration team. And I get the honor of presenting Braintree Sandbox. We've seen a lot of good content today, some demos on Fastlane, and we're all excited to get ready. So one of the first steps that we want to be able to walk you through today is getting into Braintree Sandbox. So I'll be covering the signing up for Sandbox. It's a very simple process. Getting that Sandbox account signed up, and then walk you through some of the areas in that Sandbox account that will be beneficial for your testing today and going forward. So before I get into it, I do like to mention, we get these questions a lot. With Sandbox, Braintree Sandbox, there are no costs or fees to play around or test with the Sandbox. There's no limited trials, anything like that, or a requirement to enter a credit card or anything. You're welcome to play around in the Sandbox as much as you want, as long as you want. We have also the capability of creating multiple Sandbox. If your project has the need for multiple gateways, maybe you have different business units that you'll be setting up in production, our recommendation is that you do that in Sandbox as well. So feel free to create all the Sandbox accounts that you need for your project. And sort of the last question we get, Sandbox is completely independent of production. No testing, payments, anything you do in Sandbox will not reflect in production, so no worries there. So signing up for Sandbox is very easy. you go to braintreepayments.com/sandbox. You can also Google just Braintree Payments, sign up Sandbox, and that'll take you onto our Test Everything page. So let me go ahead and make this a little bigger for you. So signing up for Sandbox only requires a couple of data points. We just want your first and last name, a company name if you wish, and an email. And clicking Submit will generate an email out to you. So this is what the email will look like. It's going to have some information about what Sandbox can do for you. And we want you to click on that Complete Sandbox Sign Up. And on the final page, you're going to enter in a username and a password to complete that Sandbox sign up. One note, that username does need to be unique. It needs to be unique across all other Sandbox accounts, so it may take you a few tries to pick out the right one. But once you get that done and you click Login, it's going to take you to the initial Sandbox homepage. So that's it. It's super easy to sign up. I know that we talked about in our sessions today about how you can get set up within one day in the learning that we had earlier. That's as easy as set up. You can see on the initial homepage here, there's not a lot going on, but really the main thing that we want to call out is the credentials. As you sign in, an initial set of credentials is generated for you. You can take the merchant ID and then the public and private key pairs and go right and start developing. So that first set is right there for any testing or curiosities you have. As you start to transact, of course, the page will change into the normal account style, so I'll show that here in a second. But out of the box, you have a set of credentials ready to go, and the gateway comes enabled for credit cards, all the major card brands in the region that you signed up for, and PayPal payments in a mocked flow. So you can just start testing those main payment types right away. Let's see. So next I want to show you just the content that we have inside Braintree Sandbox. So once you've created the account, you're able to log into your account. Make sure I got my password. Of course. So as you can see, the main page changes a little bit. This section is sort of the main landing page of any Braintree account. In production, of course, it will give you graphs on transactions, your volume and dollar amounts that you're taking on a given day. You have all kinds of quick links that an admin can use to get reports and things like that. There we go. So the main thing that I'll be talking about, I want to show how to create users, how to look at the different features. So all of the things that we'll need during an integration are found at the gear at the top right. This gear has a lot of the settings for enabling payment methods and all that good stuff. So I'm going to start by showing you the API user section. So this account has a couple of users. And the first thing that I want to mention with our users is every API user maintains their own credentials. So as I created that first user, when I created the Sandbox account, I got that initial set of credentials. Those credentials are owned by that primary user. As I create new users in the account, and then those users log in and create their own credentials, those credentials are owned by that new user. And the reason I mention this is because if you're having teammates create credentials for your production sites, and then maybe that teammate leaves the company and you delete the user, it will also delete the credentials that go along with it. So a recommendation we make with our users is to think about the long-term effects, maybe create a general technical team user that will own the credential sets, and your team will have access to that so that anytime you need to cycle credentials, anyone from your team can do that. And if anyone leaves, all you have to do is change the password to that user. But with the users, you have lots of capabilities. We define it in two different ways. Clicking on the roles option, it allows you to create role sets for the teammates that you'll be creating. So in production, you might want to create like a customer service or finance, fraud, any of these teammates that might have specific permission sets. You can assign that to the roles. That way, when you go in and create users, all you're doing is entering in their contact information, the role set that you want, and submit. So it's a pretty quick process there. As you create users, it will be a very similar flow like we saw on the sign up. So as I click on new user, all I have to enter in is the name and the email address. Braintree will send a similar email out for your user to go in and sign up as well. That user will go in and create a username of their own, just like we saw in the other process. So until they do that, their user profile won't be created, but all this dashboard will reflect the ones that are still in that pending state. Next, after users, I'd like to show how we manage currencies and business processes. So with Braintree, we have a structure called merchant account IDs. And what merchant account IDs are the way that we allow you to facilitate different lines of business as well as the different currencies that you want to offer on the website. So let's say I'm offering USD, Canadian dollar, and euros on my website. What I would do is I would come in here and I would create 3 merchant account IDs, assigning the specific currency code to that. And in my transaction request, I'm passing the merchant account ID value as the currency code. A lot of other processors will have you designate the currency code in the transaction. We have you designate the merchant account ID. One of the benefits of this is, while it allows you to separate out the currencies and allow you to do reporting for that, you can create additional merchant account IDs for your different lines of business. So if you have a couple of lines of business, maybe with their own separate websites, you can still use the same gateway. Even if they're both processing in the same currency like USD, you can create separate merchant account IDs for each one, allowing them each to pass their specific one. So that way, when you're looking in the reporting or when you're doing your reconciliation, you can get this clear definition of these different lines of business. One call out on the merchant account IDs. In Sandbox, you can see I have this button that says New Sandbox Account Merchant ID. So in Sandbox, you can create them at will. You can see I have a whole host of them. But in production, you do need to reach out to the teammates at Braintree to have them create them for you. There's some setup on the back end to get them connected to the processors. So now, a lot of the talks today, we saw a session that had an entire section about the different payment methods that you could offer. So the next section I want to show you is in account settings. The account settings is a great spot. It's one of my favorites. It's where you can enable the different payment methods and the different payment types that you want to offer on your website. So like I said, Braintree Sandbox, when you first create the account, you'll have PayPal and you'll have credit cards ready to go. But you have the ability to offer the different digital wallets as well as the Fastlane section. So once I'm in account settings, you can see I have processing options and customer checkout. If I click on customer checkout, this takes you to the section that allows you to enable Fastlane. So you can come right in here. Of course, my account already has it on. So you would click turn on in this section. And just like that, Fastlane is enabled inside your Sandbox. The rest in processing options, this is all of the other payment types. So you can see I have PayPal, Venmo. With PayPal, like I mentioned at the beginning, when you first set up the Sandbox account, it'll generate the PayPal flow that you can test with in sort of a mocked flow. If you want to experience the full end-to-end testing of PayPal, you have the capability of adding actual PayPal Sandbox accounts into this gateway. It allows you to connect that business Sandbox account so that if you wanted to test the end-to-end on a PayPal, you can go make a PayPal buyer account and test the checkout, see transactions go end-to-end. You would see the transaction land in Braintree as well as in the PayPal account. So you have that capability here. We have other features in here. You can add custom fields that allows you to pass through custom data in the transaction requests. So you can set up all kinds of good data that you want to pass through, as well as just some other features here that we offer. So that covers a lot of the basic setup. The last couple things I wanted to show is just as you start testing. So again, as you start testing, you'll see your page turn into this, where you see the graphs. And you may want to see what the transaction looks like after you've processed it. So we have, on the main home screen, we have options for you to look at your transactions. So if I click transactions up at the top, you see I have a list of filters that I can use to pinpoint either a set of transactions or a very specific one. So I can change my payment instrument. Let's say I just want to look at credit card payments. I can change if a specific merchant account ID was processing, I can do that. And then, of course, a date range selector. Searching the transactions will give you a summary list. This list will show you the basic data about a transaction, but if you really want to dig in and see what was going on with that transaction, you can click on the transaction ID for any of the payments, and you'll see the full set of data. If you passed in a order ID, if you were passing customer data, you would see what all of that data looks like. In addition, you would see transaction history. So down at the bottom, it'll show you when you authorized the transaction, which user authorized it, when it was settled. All that good stuff shows up in here. Now, another thing that you can do is if you're just doing a quick transaction search, if you come into the account, you'll see this search bar up at the top. If you paste a recent transaction ID in the search bar, it will take you right to that transaction. You can see it just does a quick search. So if you're just testing and you want to see some details on a transaction, you can quickly go right into that. Now, the last section I want to talk about is the Braintree Vault. If you're using our Vault, it's actually a common feature. This is the section where you can look at the customers that you're creating and the associated payment methods. So just like our transaction search, we have a few filters you can use to search your Vault. So for example, if I just search my Vault for anything that was created this month, we would see that I have a few customers created here. Clicking on the customer ID that's on the left, the summary page will give you any data that you've passed in, like my email or my phone number, and then it will show any associated payment method and a list of transactions that this customer was associated with. So it's a nice way, like if you're kind of looking at your Vault and you want to see what's been happening, you can use this to search your customer records. And that covers it. That's Braintree Sandbox. We will have Q&A at the end, so if you want to see some stuff, we can take some questions at the end on that. But I will go and hand it off to Anand, who's going to cover some of our dev docs and integration samples.
Thanks, Micah. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. I'm going to log out of his Sandbox account very quickly. There you go. And log into mine. So, hi, everyone. I'm Anand Sureka. I'm a solutions engineer at PayPal. And if you're wondering how I got this arm, it's because I got into an argument with Micah. Anyway, so we learned a lot about Braintree today. We spoke in the earlier sessions, we spoke about Braintree, our enterprise-grade payment gateway. We learned about some of the payment basics and how card processing happens. And then Vinay spoke about the integration options that we have. Micah spoke about the setup of the Sandbox environment and the control panel demo. I'm going to try and put all of that data together and see what resources, tools, dev docs, sample code that you have access to, which can accelerate your Braintree integration. Srini pointed out in the keynote that we're in this business of speed. So let's see how these resources can speed up your integration. We're going to start. I'm not going to spend too much time on the slides. I'm just going to give you a demo of things. So I'm going to dive into the dev docs directly. Let's start with the client-side SDK. We've already spoken about this. It's an important component where you run this component on the client side. What it does is it takes away the PCI compliance burden off your plate. Braintree client-side SDK directly collects the card credentials, the payment credentials, and sends it over to the SDK. But it's not limited to just the card details, right? So it can also collect other payment methods, supports other payment methods like adding a PayPal button or a Venmo button or Apple Pay for what have you. So the idea is that we collect the credentials for you, send that over to the Braintree server, and that would give you that one-time use nonce. We'll see if we can run through an example for that. And then that nonce is used for the actual transaction, whether you're going to vault it or use that for a transaction. For the client-side SDK, we have two versions. I think we alluded to this earlier in the day. We have the drop-in UI. It's a widget that would sit on your client-side code, an HTML widget. It collects the card credentials. You can also add a payment button to it. We also provide you a link with the code pen so that it's very easy to implement, and you can see the sample how that works. I have a code pen set up and gives me a view of what that widget, the drop-in UI, is going to look like. I have the cards and the PayPal. So if I click on the PayPal one, I see that PayPal button. And if I choose the card, I would see that widget in here. The idea is exactly what we said. It'll collect the credentials for you and send it over to the server. Now, going back to my documentation, again, I'm just going to switch screens right there. We also have another option, the hosted fields. It's a lot more popular with our larger merchants. The reason is that it gives you a lot more flexibility with the UI. It's no longer a widget, it's individual fields. The idea is still the same. We will collect the card credentials, but these are individual fields that you can place them as you see fit on your UI, and gives you a better control of the experience that you offer to your consumers. So that's on the client side. That does much of the heavy lifting, including Fastlane, that's built into the same client-side SDK. Let's dive into the server-side SDKs. Once again, I'm not going to walk through the entire dev doc, just going to give you an idea on what it looks like. This is back on the integration pattern. Braintree started out building out the server-side piece using the SDK. What I mean by that is that it's been around a long time. It's robust. It offers 100% of the functionality that the Braintree platform has to offer. So all your complex payment scenarios, use cases, everything can be addressed using the SDK. Vinay pointed out earlier that it's available in 6 flavors. So if you see a drop-down here, you have the Java, .NET, Node.js, PHP, Python, and Ruby. So what the DevDoc does is anything that you see here, the use cases that are defined here, the transaction or the vaulting calls, we've got embedded code right here, which you can copy and use in your application to sort of accelerate your development process. I know it's a bit of an eye test, but the box in black, depending on the language you select, will give you that sample code. In addition to the guide, the dev docs and the embedded sample code, I'm going to switch my screen one more time. We have a public repository, a github.com/Braintree. This is where you would find fully functioning sample apps associated with each of those SDK, associated with most of our components. The idea is if you download them, they usually have a little README file and a config file. It'll tell you how to get that set up. All you need is the API credentials associated with your Sandbox environment, and you can get a sample app running, which is collecting card payments or PayPal as a payment method, all of that built into those sample apps. Time permitting, we'll try and walk through one of those examples and see how quickly we can get that set up. So that was on the server-side SDK. Now, like I said, it's robust and powerful, yet it's limited to the 6 languages that we spoke about. A general, so what we were looking at is offering up sort of a language agnostic version of the integration on the server side, and that leads us to our server-side SDK. Our GraphQL APIs. And very similar to the server-side SDK. In fact, if you look at the documentation built in, it's SDK first, but you do have links which leads you to the GraphQL piece. And that'll tell you the API calls, describes the mutation, describes the variables, what the sample request and response is going to look like it's defined for you within the dev docs. I'm not going to walk through too many examples or walk through the dev docs, obviously. But what I'm going to do is give you insight into a couple of tools that we have to make your life easier if you choose the GraphQL route. So we have the API Explorer here. I have that open here, the API Explorer. Let me refresh that page because I logged in and logged out of the account. And what it does is, without any sort of setup, as long as you have your Sandbox account and you've logged into it, the API Explorer tool is built into our dev portal, where you can create those calls, add those variables, and run them right in line right there. So I have again, an eye test. If people can see, look at your closest screen. I have the charge payment method API call up here. I'm going to change that transaction to maybe $100 so we can identify it and submit that transaction. That was successful. I did get a transaction ID, and it says it's submitted for settlement. The other little nugget that I want to point out, if you notice that for the payment method ID, I've got a fake valid nonce. A lot of testing tools and nuggets available for you to accelerate your testing. You may be working on the server side while the client side may not be ready to serve that nonce up to you. So we have the fake valid nonce as an example for you to run your server-side code and sort of accelerate it. Again, we also have the docs embedded in here. Again, quick. It's like a little cheat sheet. If I'm looking at, pardon my left-hand typing there. So if I'm looking at a particular mutation, the create client token, I see what that payload's going to look like, what the parameters are, and it'll help me create that sample request right here, looking at the documentation on the right. Then again, it's not limited to the API Explorer. We do offer a full Postman collection as well. So once again, I'm going to switch my screen. By the way, none of this is behind my VPN. It's all public URLs. So all of this content that I'm sharing is available to you. So I'm looking at postman.com/PayPal. So if you land on this page, you'll see two collections in here. One, the PayPal API, that's looking at the complete payments platform, the PPCP platform, the one which is happening in the parallel room right now. But for our conversation, we're going to focus on the Braintree GraphQL API. Let me get in here. I've got a simple instruction sheet. Again, much like the client-side SDK, the server-side SDK, and the GraphQL APIs, it talks about the API credentials that I would need, how I can plug that in here, and start making those calls. I'm going to walk through. I'm going to switch my screen one more time and go into the Sandbox environment. And on the gear icon, I'm going to look at the API tab. This is where I would see the credentials that I need, either the API keys, the public key and the private key, or the tokenization key. They have different levels of access. The dev docs defines it quite well. I'm not going to get into the details, but just to give you an idea, that's where your API keys are available, which you would need to run any of these SDKs or the GraphQL APIs. Going back to GraphQL, I'm not a big fan of the web version of Postman, so I have a forked copy for the desktop version. I'm going to switch my screens and show you, maybe make a call or two and see how that works. One call out, when you fork this copy, for some reason, the environment variables don't get copied. I don't know if it's a Postman thing, but just make sure you copy those environment variables over so that your collection works. So I'm going to switch my screen and go into my Postman collection. All right. I've got one call out, though. That's the collection that I forked. I did change the authorization on this. Originally, the way it's designed, when you download that, when you fork a copy, it looks at a bearer token and uses the tokenization key. I've changed that to use basic auth with my public key and private key. And the reason I've done that is that it gives me a larger access on all the APIs. So it just makes it easier. That's the only difference. And then once I've set that up, I'm going to go down and make a tokenized credit card call. I have that call ready here. I have the variables in here. One more time, I want to draw your attention to the card number. lot of test cards to test both positive and negative flows available to you in the Braintree docs. I'm going to use a Visa, a date in the future, and make that call. What it generates is that nonce. Now, arguably, you likely will not use this API call because you will be using the client-side SDK that will generate the nonce for you. But just in case, that's what happens behind the scenes. That we run the call and we get that payment method ID. And as we said, it's a nonce. It's a single-use token that you've got as part of this API call. Now, once I've got that token, the next thing I'm going to do is authorize the payment method. Again, one more time, I have the call set up already, and this I'm going to make it $101 and submit my transaction. My script was designed to store that payment method, and now I use that payment method. I've got the authorized transaction. It says it's authorized. Now, we did 2 of those API calls. Let me go back into my Sandbox account. We'll do the transaction search. All right. I'm just going to leave it as is and run that. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Let's try that one more time. No, it doesn't come. Did that go through? No, I've already used the token. I have no idea what happened, but the idea is that you will be able to see your submitted transaction in here on your account, the one we carried out. That was the $100 that we carried out using the API Explorer, and there should be another one for $101, which is just authorized using the GraphQL API. Oh, my demo gods are not with me, but anyway, the next thing I'm going to talk to. How are we doing on time? We still have 20 minutes. So let's take a quick look at one of the sample apps. And since we've been talking about Fastlane, I thought what we could do is spend some time looking at the sample app for Fastlane. I'm going to use the GraphQL version. Most of these sample apps have both the client side and the server side implemented right there. The GraphQL version does have a server folder which has different flavors of the different languages that have been used, but they're still making the GraphQL API calls. If you look at the landing page on this one, it's got a set of instructions on how to run it. It's focused on the Node.js one, but the idea is the same, that you would need your client credentials set up and fork a copy, set up the API keys, and you should be able to set up Fastlane very quickly. I do have a forked copy of this collection, so I'm going to switch my screen to my IDE. That's the one. So the only thing that I've done here is I've taken this environment.env file. It asked me for my Braintree merchant ID, my public key, my private key, and I've updated that and put that under the node folder. Those are the values from my Sandbox environment. And I'm going to do an npm install. Oops, not there. On my command prompt. First time around, it takes a little longer, but I've already done this before. And then I do an npm start. Make sure I start the server. There you go. And hopefully, if I go into the browser and start the local host, ta-da, that works. Okay, so we got Fastlane working here. All this while, through a couple of sessions that you've seen, it was a recorded demo that you were seeing. So this is something live. Hope it works. I've got a profile on Fastlane, the Sandbox environment. So imagine this to be the checkout experience, the checkout page on your merchant side. The user's already selected what they want to buy. They've already passed the cart page. They already passed the PayPal button. I'm not sure why they wouldn't select PayPal. But they're on this page, and the only information we prompt the user is their email address. And I go ahead and provide that. Now, if there's a match on that email address and there's an associated phone number, we would send out that one-time SMS. This is a lower environment, and we're very creative with that SMS code, so it's all ones. And just like that, I get my shipping address and my payment methods associated with that profile. Again, I'm not tied to it. If as a consumer, if I want to change my shipping address or add another card, I can do so. I'll let my shipping address be, but I look at my payment method and I press change. I have 2 cards on that profile. I can always add a third one. And all of this is, by the way, powered by that client-side SDK, right? So all these pop-ups, as we saw in the previous sessions. So, the MasterCard sounds fine, and it's already pre-selected, and I go ahead and check out. And that's it. The transaction was submitted for settlement. So that's all the amount of time it should take for you to implement. So in the last 20 minutes or so, we walked through the dev docs. We walked through the code samples. We saw what the GitHub library is going to look like. We walked through GraphQL APIs, including the API Explorer and the Postman collection. We also implemented a sample app for Fastlane. And I was able to do this with one hand in the sling. So it's pretty easy. So just a call out to the developers here. We have a hackathon at 3:30 later this afternoon. Use this code. Come find us if you need links or anything to accelerate your development. Get a working version of Fastlane working even on your lower environment of your merchant side. And there's some really good prizes to be won. So once again, I'm going to go back to my developer portal, and I look at the transactions tab and search that. There you go. I found my $101 transaction, which was authorized on the Postman collection, and the $1 transaction through the MasterCard that we use on the Fastlane. So yeah, so that was that. And with that, I'll call Micah and Vinay back on the stage, and we'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Anand. I'd like to open the floor for Q&A. If you have questions, raise your hands so I can see them.
Content is directed towards debit cards. Wanted to know about ACH.
OK, so let me repeat the question. A lot of content is directed towards credit cards and debit cards. She wants to know more about ACH. And I think we do support ACH as well.
Yeah, it is an alternate payment method that is supported on the Braintree platform. In fact, we do have some verification products built in as well. Yes, it is one of those features that we offer. Again, it's lower take on, it is lower cost. We love if a lot more people actually were on the ACH platform, but it is a supported payment method. It would come under our alternate payment methods, but again, supported on Braintree, 100%.
Hold on, we'll get to the mic. Hold on.
Hello, I'm Sandeep. Thanks for the demo. So on the same note about ACH payment method, how about support for the gift cards, right? Say if I'm buying some merchant called Ralph Lauren, and as a customer, I want to use the Ralph Lauren related gift card. So how do how do the end users can add the gift card and also make a payment through credit cards or alternate payment?
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question. So similar to ACH, do we also support gift cards for specific merchants, example, Ralph Lauren or anybody like that? Okay.
Yeah, sure. So, well, gift cards not necessarily supported as an alternate payment method on this one. But if you're a merchant that's looking to offer gift cards or coupons or some kind of tokens that you want to work with your consumer, if you remember the slide that we had in the first session, those are some of the components we still let the merchant deal with. It's not on the sort of on the payment side of things. But about branded cards, though, again, if it's in the PayPal world or otherwise, we can work with the large enterprise merchant And if it's a branded card and if you have specific reward programs associated with it, we can share that information back. So does that address your question? Okay, cool.
Hey, so I have a question. Am I understanding Fastlane is correct? Let's say there's 100 merchants using Fastlane. If a customer adds their card to one account, and then another merchant asks that customer put in your email, they can access the card that is on that customer's account, right? So it's kind of being shared across all merchants. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. So it is shared across all merchants in the sense it's still at the consumer level. We do not share those card information with the merchant for transaction. It's still a token that is shared. So if you use it at merchant A and they know that you've used card ending 1111, they don't have access to the full PAN. They never will. We still control that. So it's sort of a wallet that PayPal manages as an organization, not the merchant. It is shared across the merchants in the sense if you've used it at a merchant A, it will be available to anywhere, any other merchant that's using Fastlane. In fact, it goes a little beyond that. We will look at your existing PayPal accounts as well and try and pull those payment method from that profile as well. So yeah, it's kind of stepping it up 200 million accounts right off the bat.
As long as you're in the Fastlane network, that profile will be shared across all the merchants supporting Fastlane.
Okay.
So if you're on merchant A and you put your same profile, could be used on merchant B.
So my next question is, for large merchants, typically we use multiple processors. So is there any way we can use Fastlane, get the card data, and then send it to another processor that's not Braintree?
Eventually, maybe. It might be a product question that we're looking at. Omkar, do you want to take that?
We are eventually going to start introducing all of that wherein you can use the... So we are going to kind of eventually move towards that wherein a merchant can come in and access a Fastlane profile and then send that information over to say like an Arden. I think Arden's like one of the first ones we're working with. So it wasn't part of our first initial launches, but it is coming up.
Yeah, I guess another follow-up, which is to make it work in the short term, right? If I want to use multiple processors, let's say I want to take the card and send it to a processor Adyen, is there any way I could import the data? So import the PAN, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So
today it's not really available.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? We have to. So that's the thing, right? Like it's because the merchant does not get access to the raw card information, we have to find a way to directly send that information to the end PSP. So as of today, you won't have that ability to import or even pull out that information. And even in the future, when we do open it up, you as the merchant will not get access to it. We'll make that push for you.
Right. I think right now Arden has that ability. Hopefully we'll open it up to other PSPs. But the idea is probably to keep it within those PSPs that are eligible for it. Okay.
Yeah, one question is about the fraud control. So for the card, for the Fastlane, do we have any fraud control for that, or we need to still use the third-party fraud control, such as Forter, something like that?
Okay. Let me repeat the question. So for Fastlane, is there a fraud control that we use that comes built in with Fastlane, right? Is that the right question?
Yes, I mean inside the Fastlane,
Yeah.
any fraud control, right?
Okay.
Or we still need to use the Forter or RiskFile or CyberSource something?
Yeah, CyberSource. Okay. Okay, so I understand the question. Micah, you want to take it?
Yeah. Basically, once you're past the client-side portion, the transaction turns into any other credit card transaction that we're running through Braintree. So we have, of course, in-house fraud controls, or fraud protection advanced, or if you're leveraging a third-party fraud system, you could use those as well. Fastlane is there to collect, on the client side, to collect and tokenize the card data. And as soon as it's done that, you get that nonce, and you then run that transaction like any of our other credit card products. Yeah. So it's kind of a long way of saying, yes, you can either use ours or your third-party fraud providers the way you would with any other PSP today.
Yeah, nothing changes really, is what we're
Yeah.
saying. Any of the fraud controls that you had in place with Braintree card processing in general, whether it's R for fraud protection advanced or CyberSource or what have you, that remains unchanged. Fastlane's just the client-side piece accelerating, collecting those cards, and initiating the transaction.
Yeah, on the back end, you can use fraud protection advanced, or we have charge hound to make sure you don't get charged. But we have all the mechanisms in the back. You can use whatever you want. But in-house, we have fraud protection advanced that we recommend.
Okay, thank you.
Could there be like partial Fastlane profiles where the users didn't save the shipping address but saved the card? And do you still like allow? Are those still eligible to be identified by other merchants?
It's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer, whether you can. Oh, there you go. Omkar has one right there.
I think one of our leads has it.
So you might end up in a scenario, it's like majority of the use cases, you will have a customer with a Fastlane profile that has a shipping address and has eligible payment methods. But you might run into a scenario where for your specific use case, you may have disabled, say, Amex, and the only card that they have is Amex. The beauty of the Fastlane components is it will handle all of that for you. So if there's no eligible shipping address, it will ask the customer to add a shipping address. If there's no eligible card, it will ask them to add a card. Yeah.
And I guess a similar question, I mean, we have a lot of different complicated geo-based validation rules already in our checkout flow.
Yep.
Are we expected to replicate that in this SDK?
So
or
I know that in the so again, the question is, do we have to replicate all the geo-specific requirements specifically? So in Fastlane, I know that you can, in the parameters, you can pass all the geo parameters, which is allowed or which is disallowed. Apart from that, is there anything else that you want to replicate?
So what that would do is essentially kill any shipping addresses in California. Like, I don't want to ship things out to California.
require zip code in India.
I see.
Stuff like that.
So the address validation is in the works. Right now, we offer this in the US, but the idea is exactly that there will be logic, the validation logic per country, per region would be built into the Fastlane tool for collecting the address.
Okay.
It is limited at this point in time. It's US
side.
only, but we plan to expand that exactly the same way that you described.
Yeah, on the US side, I mean, if you don't want to say, supposedly you don't want to ship it to Hawaii, you can say excludes Hawaii. It's in the parameters itself. Right now, it's only US, but pretty soon it will be available everywhere else.
Got it. And just a quick question. I mean, I'm a product person, so maybe
Sure.
We have a checkout flow, right? So we can't just autofill that with the values we get from this SDK. We have to use your front-end components.
Right.
We have to. Okay.
So you basically want to make sure that when you're passing it in the front end, you want to have an excludes list or an includes list, right? So that it's agnostic to what the user enters, right?
Mm.
Is that the question?
No, my question was more about the components itself. Can we just use our own front end? Is there any scenario? Is there any flexibility where we can just continue to use our own?
No, go ahead, Omkar. Yeah.
So I think you're leading to more about flexibility in the user experience itself, like having your own shipping address fields and things like that. So if you remember in our session today before, the way Fastlane is divided is we have two types of integration. One is called the payment component, and the other is a more flexible one. So what payment component does it handles most of the UI for you. But if you choose the flexible option, then you get the option to, okay, I want to have my own address fields and things like that. What it will do still as of today is we still will host the card fields, and we'll still host the approval that the customer has to tick mark. So when they say hey, I want to sign up for Fastlane, that toggle that's there, we still host that. But we will give you control on the shipping address and things like that.
Yeah. So what I showed right now was the fixed component. I want to say the rigid one. The flexible one would let you program the experience for the address collection, for that matter.
Any other questions?
Going once. I'm just
We have about 2 more minutes. If there are any other questions, I know there's another session after this, and then there are one-on-one session, hands-on coding sessions. Feel free to find any one of us with white shirts. If you've seen us, don't hesitate. I know you guys are going to be coding more, but come find us wherever we are. We're happy to help you guys. Cool.
The QR code.
Oh, and again, there's a QR code to scan. There's a scavenger hunt going on. Please scan that so you get credit for attending this session. And then any other session you'll see the QR code later on. Please scan that. Cool. Thank you. You guys are good guests.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.